Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Eastlink TV, Eastlink Community TV. I am your host, Sean McKenna, and we've got a special guest here. A lot of you folks are going to recognize this guy. If you don't recognize his face, as soon as he talks, you're going to recognize him. Mr. John Biggs was I'm going to say, a huge focal point of the radio scene in Halifax for quite some time. He's in Ontario now, but Mr. John Biggs, thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's always a pleasure to see you, Sean. Of course, we've had a chance to speak in another, I guess, version of something that you did on Facebook, which was pretty cool. During the pandemic, you kind of picked up everybody's spirits with something that you had going there for us former musicians, I guess. A life before my radio career, yeah.
Well,
So
and
it was
obviously,
nice, great to be part of that.
well, we'll start off. I mean, so you played in one of the bands that we covered a lot when we first started, and that was Titan. So that would have been Dave Roberts, yourself, Mo Lazon, Bruce Nelson at one point. Your drummer's name escapes me. Your drummer was
Peter Large.
Peter Large. How can I forget a name like that? He had the best kit.
We always thought it was funny because John Biggs, Peter Large, rhythm section.
There you go, the good rhythm section. Right. So how long were you in Titan?
Not more than I guess probably 2.5 years. I think probably not that long of a stretch. It was just a really eventful 2.5 years. We were booked 52 weeks a year. You know, it was. I think they were heady times for music in the Maritimes. There was something everywhere all the time. You could go to any number of clubs and there would be live music. So it was pretty cool.
So some people every now and again they're on Facebook and they want to talk about how the scene is dead. And I don't believe the scene is dead. It's changed, and you can find pockets of things for yourself. But when you talk about playing 52 weeks a year, that was a full-time job that a lot of people don't understand. It wasn't. I mean, you could play 30 of that in Dartmouth. There were so many clubs that were around at the time. But where did Titan play a lot when you were playing with them?
We played Cape Breton in Newfoundland, PEI in New Brunswick. We did play at quote unquote home, probably 3 or 4 weeks out of those 52, but we didn't play. And when we did, we'd play Zapata's, which was an awesome bar. Misty Moon. The Palace had not really taken off when I was in the band, so it was mostly either the Moon or Zapata's or Clancy's, which was also the Wise Owl. Changed names a couple of times.
And those are great names and great bars that are obviously no longer around. And I'm glad we're doing this because a lot of people don't understand the nightlife in Halifax and Dartmouth was, incredible. It's still good, I guess, but it's a lot different. And it was incredible back then.
It was outstanding. It was actually, I think you could have used the term choice anxiety because there were so many places you could have gone to see a live band. And normally the musicians who were playing the other bars would end up at the Misty Moon, which was at first on Gottingen and then on Barrington. Kent Road in between Gottingen and Barrington. But it was the one that was open the latest because of the liquor rules in Nova Scotia were different for whether it was a tavern or a lounge or a cabaret, right? The cabarets always were the ones that stayed open the latest. And so all the musicians from all the other places they were playing around the cities would end up at the Misty Moon to see whoever was playing there. So it was kind of cool.
One of the things about Titan that I always found interesting, I've interviewed, I don't know, I've got upwards of 400 different interviews on the channel now.
Yes.
Titan seems to be one of those bands that every time they're brought up, you might bring a band up and there'll be a snicker about maybe a member of the band or whatever. But when Titan's brought up, there's nothing but respect and admiration for that band. Did you guys feel that back in the time when you were coming up?
Oddly enough, I don't think we did. I think we felt like we were kind of outsiders, to tell you the truth, because what was really happening when we were working, and it was work, but we were having fun, but there was a real Cape Breton fiddle had really caught on, and traditional music had really caught on. It was incredibly hot at the time, and we weren't any of that. I mean, we played Rush and Zeppelin and ZZ Top and Aerosmith and and we were a hard rock band, and of course our own material. So it wasn't like we felt disrespected. We just felt like we were in our own lane, and there were a lot of people that were, and we weren't anti Cape Breton music. We weren't anti-traditional. We just had the thing that we loved to do and did that. So I guess, no, we didn't feel the respect at the time, but certainly have, shockingly, I think after years and years, have learned that was the case. That, people thought we were pretty good.
And you mentioned that whole Cape Breton fiddle thing, because I think that still permeates today. And again, I'm from Sydney. There's not necessarily anything wrong with it. I didn't grow up on it. I didn't love it. For somebody that's a rock musician, I can definitely see how sometimes it impedes what you're doing, because it kind of, if you're not doing it, it narrows your choices of what you can do. Was that part of what led you to say, hey, you know what, I think I want to get a real job, or, pivot, if you will, and do something else?
No, I just think we had reached a point where I felt we needed to move on. We needed to get off the circuit. We were on the circuit and had done it number of times. I don't know how many times. I'd have to stop and think about that and count it. But we'd been around that same horn so many times. I thought it was time for us to move it across the country, or take advantage of, we had a guy calling us from California who wanted us to go there and check out what he was doing in California. And I thought that would have been a cool thing to do. It would have obviously required an investment of some kind of money. And that was maybe the reason that we didn't. But I wasn't in control of the finances. So for me, I was just a bass player, background singer who really wanted to have an opportunity to go play the whiskey and have some people from Capitol Records sit around and listen to us. That was, to me, that was kind of the next step. I wanted to see it progress to that.
Awesome. You know what? We're just getting started here in Eastlink Community TV with my good buddy, John Biggs, and we'll be back after this. Well, welcome back to Rimshots with Sean here in Eastlink Community TV. Of course, Sean, and nobody else but me would admit to that. I'm here with John Biggs. So we were talking Titan. And John, I guess at some point, I get it every now and again. You got the voice. You have a voice for, what do they call it? A great face for radio, right? At what time,
yes,
or what was, well, there you go, right? What was, I guess, do you remember that moment where you're like, you know what? I want to do something else. I want to try something different. I want to go in another direction.
Well, when I left, I really didn't have a clue. Mothers of other musicians would say, for instance, if I was on the microphone and we were practicing in their house, the mother of another musician might say, you got a nice voice, you should be on the radio. And to me, it was like, radio? I'm a musician. Why would I want to be on the radio?
Yeah.
And no longer a working musician, I thought, well, maybe I'll give it a shot. And I went to of all places where the I think CFDR still in Dartmouth in that tower, or if they moved.
No, they moved, but I remember before they were in the tower, and there that little white building that was beside the tower. Do you remember that?
Right. Yeah, that was a while ago. But when they were in the tower, I went up and I did a voice audition to get into radio school at what was then NSIT, but now I guess it's Nova Scotia Community College NSIT campus. Yep. Right? They still have the NSIT in the name, but it's now part of the community college. I don't know if they changed the name because there are other community college campuses around the province, right?
It's down on the beautiful waterfront campus right there down in Woodside by the ferry terminal. Yes, 100%.
Very good. So I was the last student to get in and the last student to get out. They essentially closed it down around me at the time. There was no more radio school after that.
Wow.
I don't know what brought it back in. I think there became another radio school later on, but they had shut it down at that time, oddly enough, for computer courses. So that was just catching on. But that was 1982, 83 when I was in radio school, and left from there for my very first job in Newfoundland. In St. John's, I had two different stations I worked at in St. John's. One was VOCM, which is the only station in the country, I think, that commercial radio station that doesn't start with a C something, because they were in before 1949. And of course, when they joined Canada in 1949, they were allowed to keep their station call letters. So VOCM was supposed to stand for Voice of the Common Man. So that was the first station I ever worked at. And then from there to Q, CJYQ, and then back home to Halifax. So,
well, and so, you know, you always hear, and I mean, obviously what you're saying is kind of a testament that I've had some other friends in radio where it's almost like you're the banker, you're in the armed forces or something where you travel around, you never get to, you know, put roots down for too long, you're on to the next thing. Back then, was that because a better opportunity came up, or it was just like, hey, you're done, you gotta move on and go someplace else?
For me, it was just wanted to progress my career, wanted to get another, like, you know, you kind of start on the all night show, and then there's, you know, a few bodies ahead of you who already have the positions that you might want to get into. So you just keep looking for the next best job. And mornings came up. Well, actually, all nights came up first in Halifax, and I came to Halifax for that. And miracle of miracles, I actually went from the all night show to the morning show in one move, which is not done a lot. As a matter of fact, there aren't that many all night shows anymore. Big cities would still have them, but they're usually voice tracked these days. So yeah, it was just kind of came through at the right time, you know, and I wanted to get back home. So that's why I left Newfoundland to get back to Halifax.
Well, and of course, a lot of people that are watching this would remember you when you had the morning show.
Yes.
That ran for a few years, and I mean, you were one of the people in the city that, you know, you'd be mentioned in the same breath as a Jerry Lawrence or you know, those guys. You were that, you know, you were right in that echelon of announcer.
The morning shows were, at the time, I think Jerry was at CHFX or CHNS. I'm not sure which one. I don't think CHNS exists anymore. There's no AM stations anymore. Nope. Anywhere.
Done.
CJCH at the time was Brian Phillips, who's still a good friend of mine and one of my favorite broadcasters ever. He's just a sharp-witted, very funny guy. And myself on C100. And so there were, Bob Powers, I think, was doing Q107 at the time. So, or Q104, sorry.
Yep.
Right? 07 is a Toronto one.
That's right.
I get confused. But yeah, so those, I guess you're in the same breath because you're in the same position, right? It's kind of like no one else does those hours. You're up at, you know, I'm up at 3:30 still to do my morning show here. So it's, I mean, if we all hung out, and we didn't, but if we all hung out, we'd have a great, you know, little coffee talk at about 10 o'clock in the morning. We could all go for breakfast together after work.
So I know a lot of people here in the business, and there seems to be a camaraderie. And I think a lot of it too might be because, you know, radio is not what it used to be in terms of how it's done and presented. It's a lot different. Was there camaraderie back then, or was it competitive, or what was the environment?
I believe it was probably more competitive because no one could foresee that it was going to change as much as it did. And when it started to change, it changed incredibly quickly. It went from, you know, staffs of 60, 75 people to pared down to 30 in some cases, like sometimes in half. And that continues to happen. I mean, there's big corporations own most radio stations now. I'm lucky I work for it's a corporation, I suppose, but it's a small one. It's a family-owned business. And when I started in Chum, it was a family-owned business in Halifax at C100 CJCH, and there's really nothing like working for a family business. They have a tendency to think differently about their employees. It feels like you're part of the family. So
that's very important. Yeah. You know what? We got to take one more break. We got to pay some bills. I mean, you know, we're a big show, but we're not a big time show. We still got to take these breaks, John. So we're going to be back with Mr. John Biggs after this. Well, welcome back to Rimshots with Sean right here on Eastlink Community TV. And I'm here with John Biggs. And, you know, John mentioned in the first segment, we did this over 2 years ago. It's hard to believe Barstool's 3 years in April, just like that. It's been 3 years. So, and I remember when we started, because when we talked to you, I mean, it was like you were up in Ontario. I think you were doing a lot of what you were doing from home. Nobody could go anywhere. It was just a weird time. And then we finally met face to face. You were down, I think, the next summer, and we hung out with Bruce and Heather, and it was great. I'd be interested to ask you, and if you don't feel comfortable answering this, I'd be fine with that. But when CanCon happened and that whole environment, because I've talked to a few people that I guess are of your vintage, and you were there, and then it happened, and you kind of had to roll with those punches. What are your thoughts on CanCon and how that unfolded? And do you think it helps the artist?
My opinion's probably different than most other people in radio. Some people find it annoying. I think it's a great thing. I just think that there are some people who, some radio companies who don't do it as well as others. And I think that it's an opportunity to celebrate Canadian music. But having been a Canadian musician, to me, it's far more important to give that space to Canadian artists, because otherwise, how are they going to get it?
Sure.
Right. I can give you a perfect example of someone who didn't necessarily like playing Canadian artists. He would have, and it was different because it was someone who ran country music on his station, and country music have some pretty massive stars. And there are people who try to get in on the ground level. They record their own CDs in their own houses, and they produce their own music. And sometimes it's good enough to make it on the radio. Sometimes the quality's not there. And he had pictures in his office of people like Toby Keith, George Strait, Faith Hill, Tim McGraw, and he would say, your song has to sound like it fits in between these artists. And that was the attitude about CanCon. I don't really feel that way. I mean, obviously the production value has to be there. The song quality you would hope would be there. But at the same time, it's an opportunity to give somebody that step up. That's changed too, though. I mean, now, Justin Bieber didn't even use radio to get in, right? He came in on YouTube, really.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned. It's like we rehearsed this ahead of time, John, because radio's changed so much now. Like back in the day, it would have been you had the on-air personalities that basically, if they were popular, the salespeople could go out and sell ads and sell airtime and whatnot, and there'd be commercials that would be on the show. And if you were more popular, you had a more popular announcer, you'd get have a better shot at it. Now it's kind of the Wild West, right? Because it's radio or social media, and it's really totally kind of changed the marketplace and the makeup.
Yeah, we've got social media that we use. Myself and my partner Lisa, we do videos pretty well every day. We'll put together reels for Instagram and Facebook, which is essentially to keep the on-air audience aligned with the online audience. So, because there are some people that listen online, our station is the fourth strongest signal in Ontario. So we reach a lot of Southern Ontario. We're not just a one city. Kitchener, Hamilton, and Brantford are our main, but we're as far as Milton, Mississauga, all the way down the highway, really, as far southwest as London. So we have this really broad audience, and some people like to listen online. So when they do, we try to enhance that experience by doing stuff on Facebook or doing stuff on Instagram. Goofy usually, but just to keep people interested in speaking. We've got a text line as well that comes into the control room, and we can talk back and forth with listeners that way, because no one has time for the phone in the morning anymore. That's kind of a changed deal, right? I mean, you can still get listeners on the phone anytime after 9 o'clock, after they're in their office or whatever it is they're doing for work. But that time of day is commuting time in Ontario, so it's not really a great time to talk on the phone. And you know, you don't want to get pulled over by a cop because you're talking on your phone and
That's fair.
to the radio. That wouldn't be good. They would be upset with us over that one.
Absolutely. Well, it happened. The Q104 ran a doozy of I won't even say what it was, but they ran we'll call it a controversial contest down here, and it kind of got some bad press. So you don't want, the officer pulls you over, and I was talking to John Biggs, and next thing you know, it turns into a scandal, right?
Exactly. That's right. That's not the headline you want, for sure.
That's right.
Contest in the afternoon on our station that requires you to text. And it's funny because there's a bit of a dichotomy there. It's on the drive home, so we know that you're driving, but we're asking you to play the contest on text. So, you know, you're walking a fine line on that one. We don't do that in the morning. They do that in the afternoon. So blame them.
You're hoping they use voice text, right? Pardon me. I got about a minute, John. And so, you've been at it a while. Do you ever get to the point where you go, geez, man, I wish I could do something else? Or is there still a love for the business that you have, that you do enjoy doing it?
I think probably more than ever. My morning show partner is a breath of fresh air. We just connected last October. We've only started this new morning show in October. So it's as long as I still can talk, I feel like I still want to get up and do this. I have a love for the industry that it's just a lot of fun. So if that continues, and I suspect it will, then I'll probably just keep doing this until they tell me to stop.
Well, and I think that's great because, like I say, you were a huge part of those mid to late '80s here, and then you had to move away for obvious reasons and whatnot. But every time I bring up your names, Biggs for breakfast, they all know you. You had that brand, you had that thing that everybody remembers it.
It was it's amazing. Even when I got back last summer to Halifax and would hang out with Steve Murphy. Now, if you don't know the name Steve Murphy in Halifax, then you haven't been watching TV.
Absolutely.
But it was funny because he would introduce me the same way. We'd go to lunch, and of course everybody would walk over and recognize him immediately. And then he would say, "You remember John Biggs?" And then he would say that phrase, that Biggs for breakfast. And, oh yeah, right. Everybody, for whatever reason, that really caught. So yeah, I'm very fortunate that way.
Well, look, my friend, I want to thank you for doing this. It's great catching up, and hopefully we get to see you out here again. And I'm starting to make some jaunts up to Ontario, so I can see we will connect over the next bit.
That would be awesome. And anytime you want me to come back to talk about anything else besides me, I'd be happy to.
I will guarantee you. You know what? We're going to have you on another podcast here really soon, and it's in your backyard. So, John Biggs, thank you so much. And folks, thanks for watching Eastlink Community TV. We will see you again next week.